Hello, this is Elena with a little pre-show message. The episode you're about to listen to is an interview with the one and only Mark Ritson. It's full of Mark's incredible insights and challenging opinions, but it's also full of profanity that's not typically found on our show. So if you have any children present, you might want to pop in your headphones. We wanted you to get the full Mark Ritson experience, and that's exactly what's coming your way. I hope you enjoy the show.
Consumers are different. They're not. The tactics are different, but the nature of what we're trying to do and the general operation of consumers remains fundamentally the same. The unchanging man or woman is the center of it.
Marketing Architects.
Hello, and welcome to the Marketing Architects, a research-first podcast dedicated to answering your toughest marketing questions. I'm Elena Jasper, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Angela Voss and Rob DeMars, and today, we're joined by Dr. Mark Ritson, a renowned marketing professor, consultant, and thought leader. Mark has taught at universities like London Business School, MIT Sloan, and even spent some chilly years teaching in our home state at the University of Minnesota. He is also the creator of the Marketing Week Mini MBA and has received numerous awards, including the PPA Business Columnist of the Year Award not once, but 4 times. We love his work and his wit, and we're thrilled to have him on the show. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, team, I'm honored to be here. I was just saying before we started, I do use and listen to your podcast. So, sometimes you go on these podcasts and you've literally no idea like what the fuck's going on. But in your case, I do know the format. So I'm prepped and ready.
Well, and we are Minnesotans, and you did a tour of duty in Minnesota.
5 years in the Twin Cities, baby. 5 years. I got my gold medal.
I actually attended the University of Minnesota when you were teaching there, so there's a good chance we were probably, doing a keg stand together at some point.
Doing shots at grandma's. Probably right.
You got it. Absolutely.
When I got there, I was a really young professor. And as you guys know, the Twin Cities are great, but everyone gets married when they're like 16. They're usually divorced around 26, 27. So by the time I got there, it was like everybody was like married except for a bunch of really bitter divorced Minnesotans who I hung out with, who I love dearly. And then when I left and got back to London, I was only 30 and I felt like I was the oldest dude in the world. And I got back to London and I'm like, it took me about 3 days to go, hang on a minute, man. I'm only 30. And that whole summer I was like, whoa, wait now. Europe is different.
Well, Mark, give us your best Minnesota accent.
Oh, yeah, for sure. No, I mean, it's been stolen for 30 years now. What would I say? Oh, yeah. Where's my pod roast? Oh, yeah. I mean, like, fuck, it's a long time ago.
Let's go to the Home Depot and buy some hardware.
Let's go to Home Depot. Oh, yeah.
There you go.
That's pretty good, Mark.
That's pretty good.
5 years is a long time. And I had a season ticket for the Twins. That was painful.
Yeah, we're sorry about that.
It was just after like Kirby Puck and all that had finished, and we were just like getting killed every time. But I loved it. I lived downtown in the warehouse district. If I'd have met the right girl, I'd have stayed happily down there. I thought it was terrific.
Well, what a loss. Minnesota almost had Mark Ritson. All right, we're back with our thoughts on some recent marketing news, always trying to root our opinions in data, research, and what drives business results. Now, before we get into our interviews, I like to tee things up with an article or piece of research, which is not easy to do for Mark Ritson because it's Mark Ritson. So I thought I'd go with an oldie but a goodie, something a little spicy. One of your many articles for Marketing Week titled, Effectiveness Ignorance Has Left American Marketing Lagging Behind the Rest of the World.
Oh, you want to go there, do you? Okay.
If you would have stayed, America would have been fine.
And as you know, in this article, you acknowledge that there is marketing greatness in the US, but there's not nearly enough leading marketing coming from the US, partly due to a lack of marketing effectiveness knowledge. And you end the article with this lovely call to action. Stop making excuses, America. Get better at marketing again. We miss you. And today you are surrounded by 3 American marketers who have been dying to speak with you since we read that article because we actually felt like it really tracked with our own experience learning and sharing marketing effectiveness here. And even after consuming a ton of content, I personally feel like we, being marketers, aren't even always aligned on what we mean when we say marketing effectiveness. So I wanted to start the interview there. How do you define marketing effectiveness?
So first of all, I'm glad you guys align with it. I was very careful about writing it so it didn't sound like I hate Americans, which I clearly don't. I love America, and it is the home of marketing. And it always will be. I think I have 2 definitions here, and it's interesting how often we don't get this right. So there's advertising effectiveness, which is what we're really talking about. When we talk about Field and Burnett, long and short, for the most part, we're talking about comms, yeah? there's a broader topic, which is marketing effectiveness, which takes us into a much bigger field in terms of market orientation, strategic development, blah, blah, blah. But when we talk about effectiveness, 99 times out of 100, we're really talking about advertising effectiveness. So the 8% of marketing that's about communications. And for me, you said this on one of your podcasts not that long ago, it really comes down to, I think, the correct balance of long and short, and within that, the right tactical array, and mixing and integrating marketing comms properly. And then the final piece is having a strategy underpinning it, which has been briefed in properly. So in sequence, I would say clear strategy, good brief, long and short correctly handled, and a good integrated mix, a learning loop coming back into strategy and redevelopment. That, for me, is practically what you look for. And a shout out to Don Schultz, the great, unfortunately not with us anymore, marketing professor who came up with that whole idea of integrated marketing. We don't talk about it enough.
I'm glad that we have a similar definition, because sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills seeing different definitions of marketing effectiveness, but we actually first got into it reading the long and the short of it. So I think that's why that kind of aligns with how we feel.
You know what was interesting, though? When I wrote that article about Americans being subpar at advertising effectiveness, the comments I got from the States were like, you don't even define effectiveness. And I'm like, I know, because I don't have to for anyone that's not in America. Everyone knows what we're talking about. But literally, if you look at the LinkedIn original post, there's 20 people going, you don't even say what effectiveness is. And I'm like, yeah, I know. We're beyond that outside of America. You have to, right? For your audience, and not being patronizing. But we have a corpus. What makes it sad for me is we are in a golden age of advertising effectiveness. We've never known more about it than we know right now. And it's weird that America is so far behind when they used to be so far ahead.
Yeah, people are kind of making your point in the comments by saying you didn't really define.
What does it mean? What do you mean by effectiveness? I'm like, it's not my definition, you know?
Yeah, we're like, exactly. Well, Mark, one thing I wanted to talk to you about was your time in academia, because I think that kind of relates to marketing effectiveness and your approach. You earned your PhD in marketing. You were a full-time professor, but now you're a consultant, a founder, a thought leader. Why did you decide to make that transition?
There's a couple of things going on there. So I'm unusual in the sense that I wanted to be a marketing professor because I really liked marketing, not because I wanted to be a professor. And if you look at most of the marketing professors I've taught with, lovely people, most of them wanted to be a professor. And marketing was the thing that got them there. That's a very different situation. I basically discovered, I think, along the way that I spent my whole academic career untenured and then tenured, battling with the idea that consulting was central to marketing academia. You know, you're not meant to consult until you're tenured. And even then, you're not meant to do too much of it because you have to publish all of these relatively pointless academic papers. And I just didn't think that was true. I went with the Indiana Jones model, which is, you know, if you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, he was like in a temple stealing a gold statue. And then the next week he's teaching kids about stealing the gold statue and stuff, right? I think that's the model that we somewhere 40, 50 years ago forgot in marketing and in business school. You cannot teach marketing if you're not doing it. The end. And even at the very best schools, I think the absence of knowledge of marketing is a scandal. I don't think it's cool. So, yeah, I was always kind of on that parameter where I was winning teaching awards. I mean, I won the teaching prize at MIT 6 weeks after I got there, right? And as I said to the dean when I got the award, this is great news for me, but it's also really bad news for you, right? Because I'm a good teacher, but I'm not that good, right? It was more that I came in with literally photographs of stuff I was doing, and we'd talk about it in class. And in every other classroom, it was just algebra. I was smelling the beginning of the end of, I think, MBA education as we know it. It'll still survive, but you can't get away with taking really lovely people with PhDs, usually not in marketing, giving them absolutely no experience of marketing at all, and then asking them to teach MBAs about marketing. And I'll give you a final example. My dad, who's not an academic by any sense, right? My dad was always obsessed with this. My dad would say, well, I used to work a lot with medical companies. He said, when you work with Baxter, for example, you work with medical professor surgeons, and they all do surgery, and then they also teach surgery at university, medical universities. But when you go back to business school, none of them do any practical marketing. They just teach it. And he's absolutely right? If you're a professor of surgery, you do surgery, right? If you're a professor of marketing, the one thing you don't do is do any fucking marketing at all. It's not good enough. And I'll tell you, the number of times I've given talks at universities and all the professors come and take notes because they want, material.
Well, there's clearly this gap in kind of professors keeping up with the latest marketing trends and changes. But I've heard that another challenge is what you mentioned. I'm guessing your opinion about research. I've heard that it's just incredibly hard to get research published. The peer review process is a mess. So even like the research that we're trying to use to teach students becomes so out of date.
Here's how it works, Elena. You've got peer review takes 3 to 4 years to publish, right? First of all, what you're tending to be publishing about in the top tier journals is so arcane and micro that it has no place. To give you a good example, I went to give a talk at Oxford University when I was still a professor, and I'd supervised a PhD student who'd published a really rather famous academic paper, peer-reviewed, and I was the co-author. And I remember sitting on the train going to present this paper and having to read the paper and not being able to understand large portions of it because it was written so ridiculously and with such a horseshit title. The whole thing's nonsense, frankly. It's nonsense. And so what's happened is that, and you've noticed this, right? What's happened is a small guerrilla army of professor-level thinkers, from Peter Field and Les Binet to Byron himself, who's not really an academic at all by the traditional measures. We've all sort of sprung up and filled the gap. And it's much to the benefit of marketers because rather than a 4-year publishing cycle and rather than journals that you cannot access without paying like $80 to read the column, even though it's publicly funded research, you can go on LinkedIn. And I truly believe the reason we're in a golden age of advertising effectiveness is because the business schools have been subsumed by a bunch of people that go straight to the market and share the knowledge, and then other marketers take it and use it. And I think that's a great thing.
I've gotten really into this marketing research stuff, and a few months ago I thought I should get my PhD. I love school. I love learning. I talked to a couple marketing professors and they told me, don't do it. They explained to me the process. It was just a nightmare. I couldn't believe it. You've created a different option for people like me that still want to learn about marketing, have an education, which is online training.
I did the hard yards in Van Pelt Library at the University of Pennsylvania. I would never want anyone to go through those years. It was just mind-bogglingly boring, right? But a few of us have done those hard yards and we're now filtering it back out to you guys.
So I'm guessing that's what inspired you to create the Mini MBA.
It's my daughter. So you can always pretend you were being driven by the market. And later on you are, right? By market orientation. But I was making $1 million a year as a marketing consultant and $90,000 a year as an academic. But my daughter came on. We've been married a long time, didn't have kids until late in the day because I was on the road. I'd be working. And my wife correctly said, right, we've had a baby now. You can't go anywhere. So I had to work out how to make $1 million a year without consulting. And that's really how it began, right? That's the origin. But Mini MBA was interesting, right? I knew it would make me the money. I knew it was scalable. And I knew there'd be a market for it. The thing that I didn't know that properly surprised me was it's better than going into the classroom. That was the one thing that if you'd have asked me at the start 8 years ago, I'd have said, no, it won't be as good as the classroom, but it'll be cheaper. And it will be more accessible. Now, it's better. And there was still 2 or 3 years where I was still teaching at business school and running Mini MBA. So it was me, the same guy, pretty much the same syllabus. But you could just see that the lessons and the impact from the online training done properly were way better than sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day. And that was the thing that blew me away.
That's so cool. When you think about how people learn, just the reimagination of traditional education, I think we can get excited by. And obviously, you've done that with the MBA. So as a well-known consultant and figure in marketing, you're also familiar with the conventional agency model, I would assume.
Yeah.
And super curious your thoughts on just the future of agencies in general. There's so much going on. Obviously, the effectiveness is a portion of this. Maybe it's different in the US versus overseas. You've got AI in front of everyone. Just curious your thoughts. What are we stepping into here?
I mean, first of all, nobody cares, right? So I think that's an important addendum to the conversation. Agency people wring their hands with what's happening to advertising. And listen, the clients will decide what they want and the agencies will follow. That's the first point, right? It's not a discussion that matters, frankly, in the scheme of things. Within advertising, obviously, it does. I saw this post by Neil Patel, right? He's like, whatever it is, it's sort of like a junior level Gary V kind of thing going on, right? And he posted this thing where he'd analyzed 150,000 posts on Instagram, and he had a formula for what you need to do in order to like have a presence either personally or as a brand on Instagram. And it was kind of like you had to post like 7 times a week, reply 40 replies a week, 2 like carousels a week, 10 videos. And it was just like bonkers, right? What occurred to me then is that's obviously where AI is going to take up the job of communications and ad agencies, right? So the digital short of it, performance communication, the stuff that we do lots of, it's targeted, it's test and learn, it's product based. That looks to me like it's going to disappear quickly and become automated. The stuff that I think agencies will continue to do is the big, long, emotional brand building stuff. I don't think machines will ever do that better than humans because we need it to be more creative, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the long brand building, creative work, big idea stuff is still the province of great full service creative agencies. I just think the digital media diaspora is going to be automated pretty quickly. If you look at a Wyden and Kennedy, I don't think they're going to be threatened by AI. But if you look at a performance digital comms local agency, I think they are.
I know we have found even internally that using AI can definitely help spur new creative thoughts. And where does that lead to? It'll be super interesting, obviously. So we already mentioned Peter Field. You recently wrote a passionate intro to his reports. TV is at the heart of effectiveness. We're a TV agency, and we repeatedly see the immense power that TV has for brands, but it still feels like it's an underleveraged channel. So how do you think about advising brands to think about TV advertising? It's not for everyone, but like, how do you go about that?
It's a lost challenge, right? There was 2 charts floating around last month that you guys will have seen. One from the Profitability 2 study, which is the one that the ThinkBox guys did in the UK, showing indisputably from $1.8 billion worth of spend that TV advertising is still, I don't say the best because no such thing exists, but a superior medium for communication, right? And at the same time, we had the other chart showing that Facebook or Meta was now basically doing more advertising dollars than linear TV advertising. So never in the history of marketing, I think, has it been more clear or proven that TV advertising is effective, nor has it ever been in more rapid a decline, right? So there's a good reason for that. I mean, let's be honest. Reach is a problem now for TV. And we talk about younger consumers. By that, we mean under 40s, right? So it's not really younger anymore, right? I think that's the problem. TV's rate card isn't going down yet. Reach is definitely an issue. But with those caveats, it remains this phenomenally impactful, effective medium if you've got the right budget and approach for it. And that's how I still think about TV. It's just remarkable. I've spent my 15 years defending it as a medium, and no one believes me. I do a lot of work for YouTube. I think YouTube is a great filler for where the reach of traditional TV falls down. But still, TV has that incredible impact. I just think it's not a message that will get across to most marketers. And I'll tell you, then, it's not even that they question whether TV advertising is a good medium. They literally look at you like you're on drugs. You've seen it, right? Particularly American younger marketers, right? Sub 30-year-old American marketers, you say to them, look, TV remains the great effective advertising medium. They look at you like you're on crack. It doesn't even work anymore. Do you know what I mean? The impact of the Gary V's of the world has been phenomenal in its overall effect. So, yeah, a brilliant medium. There's no such thing as the best medium. It always depends. But a brilliant medium that is remarkably rejected. The only thing I'd say to you is it's very clear now that all of us got this wrong 15 years ago. We talked about TV versus digital and all of that. Clearly now with connected TVs, etc., the thing is just merging into one anyway, right? That's what we're now talking about. It doesn't really matter. I mean, people talk about linear TV. doesn't matter. You know what I mean? From a consumer point of view, it's whatever's appearing on the wall at any one time.
I think it's tricky, though. We're finding the merging of the worlds because you've got those marketers that have that digital mindset now have better accessibility, or it feels more comfortable to them to step into that CTV space. But then they start applying those short-term mentalities in terms of measurement, right? Versus really looking for those longer-term impacts that are more meaningful to brands, at least we have found.
My time with YouTube, the challenge we have is it does long and short, but not with the same kind of approach, right? So that you can use it as a very useful targeted performance video medium and use short-term metrics. But it's arguably a stronger medium in many cases when it's used as a TV equivalent for sub 40-year-old demos that aren't watching linear TV as much, in which case the approach, the metrics, the creative is totally different, right?
Bothism. Speaking of bothism, Mark, you've been critical in the past, or you've had some critique on the term marketing science. You speak into marketing effectiveness, but a little more wary of the term science. Why is that?
I think we've already had this debate 35, 40 years ago and come to the correct conclusion that marketing isn't a science, science is marketing. And what I mean by that is if you look at marketing's social, reflective, creative dimensions, it's never going to fall into the same approach and parameters as a traditional scientific paradigm. Cultural and persuasive nuances involved. I like the rigor of what the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and others have brought into marketing. That's great. I just think the side effect of it, unfortunately, is when we hear about marketing science, we scare the shit out of marketers and we stop them from just doing marketing. They look for too much precision, which doesn't really exist in our field. I find a lot of marketers don't commit to research because they're worried it might not be scientific or rigorous or representative enough. And my attitude is, yeah, but you're sitting here with no data. Get amongst it. Get out there. You're not wearing a white coat. What you're doing is the best market research is often standing in an environment where consumers are thinking about or buying your products and talking to them about it. Oh, but I might influence them. Sure, you might, but we're not doing chemistry here. Do you know what I mean? That's the downside. The upside is definitely rigor. I love that. The downside is don't panic. There's no precision here. There never was. Right? Where's the freaking precision in any of this? It doesn't exist. So I think that there's two sides to it, right? But yeah, I'm not a scientist, and I think anyone that claims to be has a different agenda.
I know you've debated Byron in the past. Are you guys still chummy? Do you still share a pint?
We are the same age. We've been around for the same amount of time. I can remember Byron literally 30 years ago telling me my research on advertising was nonsense. So yeah, Byron's been Byron for 30 years in my life. You know what I mean? So I know him well. I would think he's wonderful. I think he's more dry and funny than many people realize. I mean, he's often just in a bad mood and so he doesn't suffer fools. But sometimes he's just taking the piss, but in such a dry, Kiwi way that people don't realize. I think what you realize as you get older is there are certain people, whatever you do, that you'll trundle through with until the end. And so obviously Byron will be there for me and for marketers of my generation. I mean, I deliberately positioned against him 10 years ago to make myself more famous. That was an entirely strategic approach of mine, which I think worked quite well. But there's genuine respect and also antipathy there. And again, what I love about being an academic is, or a former academic, is you can beat the shit out of each other intellectually and then be quite friendly about it. I mean, if you've ever been to a proper university research talk, someone presents a paper and people rip the shit out of it and then go for dinner afterwards. So yeah, we can happily, kick 7 bells of shit out of each other's thinking, but still have genuine affection, or at least on my side, genuine affection. I don't know how Byron feels at the moment, but probably, yeah, we respect and affection and antipathy are all happy bedfellows,
It sounds like the academic experience prepares you well for posting on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn used to be better, right? LinkedIn's turned into a bit of a cesspool. It seems to be getting worse. And I used to say that LinkedIn didn't have any real competition, but it does now. Its main threat and competition comes from the people who run LinkedIn, who have such a nonsensical view of business that they may well destroy their own network. Do you know what I mean? Like the AI questions and some of the stuff they do on that platform is so lightweight and fluffy that I worry for them a little bit.
Maybe someone will invent something as a competitor.
I'll give you a good example, Elena. Someone posted a model of marketing with a nice person, but with zero training in marketing, a model of marketing. And then they said, I appreciate any feedback. And so I posted underneath it, I said, this is terrifyingly bad. You really shouldn't post stuff like this until you've read more. And then I got 20 people were like, oh my God, that's so rude and that's so blah. I actually said in my comment, I love and respect you, but your model sucks ass, basically, right? Please go and read more and stop doing this. You know what I mean? It's bad. All these, oh my God, well, I don't like the way you've criticized him and all that. And I'm like, look, in the end, I said to them all, do you want a forum or do you want a forum, right? If we're going to have a debate about stuff, you need to be able to say to someone, I have a PhD in the topic. I am an expert, whatever you might think of my point of view, your model sucks and it's all kinds of wrong. That's my feedback. LinkedIn needs to be a place where you can do that. Not personal attacks, but professional differences of opinion. And it's like, guys, what the fuck has happened to you? Have a fucking debate and then have a beer. You know what I mean? Everyone's got the same interest. So there's a real problem with the LinkedIn kind of stuff now. Everyone's got to be supportive. And yet at the same time, there's that weird passive-aggressive yuckiness going on. Do you know what I mean? That I just find unpalatable.
We're from Minnesota. We understand passive-aggressive.
Well, but Minnesota's a good model, is it not? And most people won't have a fucking clue what we're talking about. But Minnesota's conservative liberal, right? It's conservative liberal. Minnesota Nice, which is this legendary thing, which is true, right? Is there's that sort of that 3 inches of pleasantness, but underneath it's not unpleasantness. It's just privacy and respect and stuff. Minnesota's a good model for the United States, but you're being led by the East Coast, which, I mean, I don't know if you've been in Manhattan lately, and I'll go back next week, but this very un-American thing where you can't say what you think in a meeting anymore, right? Because of the optics. You'll debrief it later with certain people and not other people. No way to run a business. In my class last week on the Mini MBA, I was telling the story about I'd been working for a large cosmetic brand in California, and they'd just broken $1 billion revenue for the year. And I'd flown to Manhattan to work for Moet Hennessy, who I worked for at the time. And I was telling the guys in the room how this little makeup brand was now doing $1 billion. And unbeknownst to me, Gilles Hennessy, who's the H in LVMH and MH, was sitting on the other side of the room and come in and we're all drinking coffee. And I was just going on about this $1 billion of revenue. And Gilles Hennessy said to me, how much of it was profit? And I said, oh, I don't know that. It was just a revenue figure. And he said, maybe you should shut up then.
Oh, well, all right then.
But you know what? He's fucking right. He's right. See what I mean? I was using it as an example of revenue versus profit. But he's right. And that stuff doesn't happen anymore. That's the kind of thing you want to happen where Gilles very smart and very tough, but he's right. Anyone can do $1 billion of revenue. You might lose $400 million off the back of it, right? I think I miss that. And it's like, what? Let's just talk about the thing. But I feel sad for it, and I don't know if it gets fixed.
Well, Mark, you can comment on my LinkedIn post and give me feedback anytime. It only helps my reach. So
don't it? Well, that's the other thing. Like, you're right. Every time I jump on something, this is bullshit. They get 900,000 people go, oh, I wouldn't stand for that. I'll follow you. Bloody hell. Yeah, all right, Elena. Yeah. I'll come after you next week.
Yeah, have at it. I'm sure there's stuff to come after. Well, Mark, if you'll humor us, I'd like to do a couple rapid fire questions because we had so many questions for you and we just couldn't fit them all in a short podcast.
You can do a longer podcast with me. Like it's often a good sign, right? People have like these things where they have like, oh, our podcast is 30 minutes. I'm like, we'll see.
It's the attention span challenge. Okay. First question. In your opinion, what's the most underrated marketing channel?
Radio. Even TV does better than radio. You think it's hard in TV, try working in radio. If you put about 10% of your budget in radio, irrespective of what you're doing, the sidekick effect is just phenomenal on everything else. It plays with everyone else really well, and it doesn't have that kind of bigger budget requirement for TV to get going. So yeah, radio for me is the most abused of all the mediums.
Our agency originated in radio. We only put it to bed when COVID just about killed it, adding radio back to the strategy list.
Mark Ritson said so. All right, next question. What marketing myth do you find yourself busting most often?
It's probably it's probably this idea that we're living in different times. I saw it this morning on someone was saying now with AI and digital and blah, 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 consumers are different. They're not. They're not. The tactics are different, but the nature of what we're trying to do and the general operation of consumers remains fundamentally the same. The unchanging man or woman is the center of it. I mean, look at the D2C myth, right? So, when we went to that decade where D2C brands were completely changing the rules of marketing until none of them made any money, and then they just turned into little bags of piss. That myth grew because everyone in marketing was looking for something new and different that wasn't like it was before. That's the one that I go after. Like, I was 100% cynical of D2C from the minute it emerged, because I know things aren't that different. I know you can't invent a new model of marketing. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, that's the big trope that I go after.
What's one book every marketer should read?
Old Man and the Sea. What a bunch of Philistines we are. With all these marketers, they read like Claude Hopkins, Scientific Advertising, right? 1923. People read that. No, they don't. People say they've read that. They take a photograph of it and put it on their LinkedIn field. So I've just read Claude Hopkins. What a great book. Fuck off. You haven't read Claude Hopkins. No one's read Claude Hopkins in 50 years, right? So I think what marketers should do is read something a little bit more interesting. I had a lovely guy from Mumbai, and he was like, someone had posted a photograph of all the marketing books they'd read. And I said, why don't you try reading some non-marketing books and having a life? And I'd recommended, I think it was The Old Man and the Sea. And then this guy from Mumbai, who hadn't quite got the point of it, I think, said, but I like reading finance, corporate finance. I said, you need to read some Hemingway. He's really good on corporate finance. He's like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, yeah, he's great. He's great, So, yeah, I think The Old Man and the Sea can teach you how to write and how to make choices, which is probably more important than what you'll learn from. I tell you my favorite thing. This year, someone sent me a book called Digital Marketing. These people do this all the time. I've never met them. I don't know anything about them. They email me and say, could you read my manuscript, which is 600 pages long, and then write something for the back of the book? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to read your fucking book. And they're like, well, just give me a quote. And I'm like, no, because I need to read the book to give you a quote. And then this guy had written the book Digital Marketing. I said to him, by the way, have you read your book? And he said, I wrote the book. And I said, I know, but I wondered if you'd read it because it's about digital marketing and you're writing a book about it. That seems to me like you aren't following the actual principles of what you've probably written inside the book. Like people say to me, when are you going to write a book? I'm like, never. What are you talking about?
I saw you knock Ogilvy on advertising as a high school kid. The naked pictures in that book did give me interested in advertising. So
there you go. Ogilvy on advertising. Like, it's not that good. It's not. Okay, there's 2 or 3 good quotes, right? It's not that good. Never write a book is one of the most important pieces of advice to give anyone. Like, it takes a year of your life. Who's reading books anymore? Like, properly? No one.
We might be the exception. Like, guilty as charged over here.
Oh, what are you reading?
There's so many. I mean, I got to go outside of marketing too, but like, there's just classic, like, Blue Ocean Strategy and
yeah. Okay.
So there's some good ones there.
If you want one though that I have read that I do like, I'd still like Rommel's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. That's
a great one.
You can read on the train. That's interesting and well written and teaches you stuff. Reading How Brands Grow is like punching yourself over and over again in the face, right?
I seriously regret asking that as a rapid fire question.
Not me. That was a good one.
It's all relative. That was,
I love that.
Closing question, Mark. What do you think the future looks like for marketing effectiveness?
Pretty much the same as it looks like now. There's no money in this, right? So I'm always, everyone's trying, no, the future will be content or the future will be AI because they're selling content or AI or whatever. It's pretty much the same. Slight alterations, but not as different as we might think. I was talking to a guy last week, and again, it was unfortunate because I was telling him, I do think AI has a massive impact on our profession over the next, not yet, in the 30s and 40s. I think it will change our profession quite a lot. And I was saying to him, one of the great things about being in your 50s is you don't really care as much. It's not like I'm going to stop working tomorrow, but AI won't have the same impact. Whereas I said to him, if I was like 29, I'd be shitting my pants right now. And he said, I've just turned 29. And I'm like, well, there you go. If you're in your 20s, I think you've got to look at how your career is going to change properly. That's the one exception. We are looking at an era of synthetic data, AI strategy. And as I said to you, the short of it becomes completely programmed and devoid of human interaction. So I think that's the one area that I do find interesting. For the most part, we overstate change. We've been doing it now for a century and we'll keep doing it. For the most part, the future looks a lot like the present, and that's very uncool. And there's no money in it. I'll tell you the great guy. You want to get on this one, Martin Lindstrom. Get Martin Lindstrom on and ask him about his COVID stuff. Because I got on a Martin Lindstrom very early. He was in like Women's Wear Daily writing a column about COVID was going to change everything forever. And I'm like, I was waiting for Martin Lindstrom or someone to come along with this horseshit, right? So right at the beginning of COVID, I'm like, yeah, here we go. I knew I was expecting you, right? COVID's going to change marketing, change the consumer forever. And I got him right at the start. And I wrote a column about what an idiot he was because everything he was saying was nonsense and it would all snap back to normal, right? And he didn't like it. He tried to sue me and he tried to complain to Marketing Week. But I was fucking right, yeah? You know, all that nonsense about it'll change the consumer economy forever. Nah. But rather than do it after the fact, I did it right when COVID was starting because I'm old now and I know which way it was going to go. That's what you've got to work on is those guys that are always obsessed with everything's going to change forever. And with Lindstrom, read my new book, COVID Marketing 2.0, to understand how it's going to change. They've all got a vested interest in the pornography of change. That's the problem, right? There's no money in me saying to you, yeah, the future looks a lot like the past, right? I can't make money from anyone with that. But if I said to you, the future's totally going to change because of Dingus 9.6, read my book, Dingus 9.6, to find out more. Change has a return on investment that unfortunately motivates everyone to talk about it. And it bedevils our industry. That was a quick fire answer for you. There you go.
No, that was great. That reminds me of when Meta says TV is dead and then they're advertising in like the Super Bowl. Similar. Grinds my gears.
Super important point, right? Go back and look at how Zuckerberg sold in advertising in 2007 on Facebook as being completely different from anything that had gone before. And now look where we are today, like YouTube and how they've done it, right? You can sell change, but you end up at the end of the day doing it like everyone else because it's not changing that much. And when you say that to younger marketers, again, they're sort of amazed and they think, well, that can't be right. But you just need to stick around for 25 years and you'll see it. We're not changing as much as we think. And that has a big implication, which is you can learn from the past. The past is not a foreign country. Both brands, theories, marketing, there's a lot to be learned from our history of marketing. It's not all forward thinking. And again, that's not a cool point of view. But if you read Neil McElroy's stuff, from P&G when he launched brand. I do it on my Mini MBA in brand management. I read the McElroy memo where he invented brand management, 1931, May the 15th, right? He sits down on his typewriter and goes, we're not doing this right. He's working on soap brands. We need to split up the soap category and have a brand manager on both. And here's what they would do. It's as relevant now as it was 90 years ago.
I think we really appreciate your perspective. It's very refreshing. And we have an audience of mostly marketers in the US. So hopefully getting on here and sharing your expertise helps just more marketers to know about effectiveness and you and your work. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We're big fans and grateful for your time. I'm worried to ask this, but any final words before we sign off?
Well, I'd like to say motherfucker because Americans invented these fantastic swear words. And I think motherfucker is right at the top. And yet we never hear them anymore in America. We should encourage more Americans to say it more frequently. It's your birthright. And yet you're just not, you're not utilizing enough. So that would be my last word.
Well, thank God we got something right.
That's it for this episode of The Marketing Architects. We'd like to thank Ayana Klaphocky for producing the show and Taylor De Los Reyes for editing. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, and if you find the show valuable, please leave us a rating and review. And if you'd like to hear more from us, subscribe to our weekly email newsletter. It's built for marketers seeking research-first analysis of the latest trends. You can go to marketingarchitects.com/newsletter to subscribe. Now go forth and build great marketing.
I do love the podcast genuinely, so keep it coming. I think you are a bright, shining light in an ocean of shitty turds.
We will quote you
I'm
on
going to
that.
add that to the podcast page. Quote
Yeah,
from Mark Ritson.
There you go.
Marketing architects.